Hi, this is Mark. Congratulations, you have found this amazingly awesome show. Chances are you're listening to it right now on whether it's iTunes or Stitcher Radio or some other mobile app that allows you to stream this amazingly awesome show to your ear holes. And I can't stress how awesomely amazing this show really is. But did you know that you can also catch the latest episode of this show on the Tangibound Network? That's right. Go check out tangiboundnetwork.com. You can look them up, and you can listen to it right there. It's even mobile-friendly. What more could you ask for? Which means you can pull it up on your iPhone or your Android, even your Windows phone. Yeah, who has one of those? But still, point remains, you can do it. You can do it. Check it out, tangiboundnetwork.com. Listen to this show, the latest episode, every time. Check it out.
Hello, everybody. This is the MLBeers podcast with your hosts, Andrew Sherman and Phillip Corwin. Phillip, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Got a day off, so normal shit.
I was about to say, we always try to do our podcasts on days, on our days off. Not for me. I have to go work later today, but, I
For
still...
the fake news?
Supposedly fake news. Local news is not fake news, but... That's a whole different story to talk about. Different thing to talk about. But, besides that, I was really enjoying the weekend and really enjoying trade deadline day as nothing really went on for my team, which I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But, I think it was interesting to watch Moneyball after, it's like 2 hours before the trade deadline is going to close, and I was like, you know what, I'll watch Moneyball. So I was just watching Moneyball, and it was just interesting how, you root for a team back in 2001, 2002. The book was written in 2003. It was just funny that how all that happened, and it's like you still root for a team that really kind of doesn't exist anymore player-wise, but the franchise is still there. And then, like, the one part, it was trade deadline 2002, and I'm like, yeah, kind of odd that 15 years later, based from the movie to now, that it's trade deadline day, and everybody's on the phone figuring out who the hell's going where. But now we have, huge cell phones like iPhones. I don't even think they make BlackBerries anymore. They probably do, but... It was just interesting that, they were just calling from their, normal phones. And then now it's like, oh, we got Twitter to pretty much tell us who's going where and instead of guessing who's going where, But and with that, it was just very, very interesting to kind of look at it from there to there.
Oh, yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
Especially following the beat writers through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
You can just constantly refresh your page every 15, 30 minutes, and you'll see something new.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it kind of reminds me of, is just how, technology has really changed not only our daily lives, but really the landscape of sports and entertainment and media. So that's where it was just kind of interesting. And then after that happened, after I watched that, it was time to get down to business and write our notes for the show. And so, now, getting through the notes and all that stuff, it is time to really talk about what we've been talking about the past 2 weeks. The trades and the trade deadline. And Phil, last week we kind of talked about how we thought it wasn't going to be really kind of a blockbuster day. I thought we thought it was going to be slow because of what was happening the week before, how there was trades here and there, a bunch of talk and no action, and then the final few moments, pretty much, even for Darvish, the final few moments of the trade deadline, people were traded everywhere. So, I mean,
How often are we wrong?
We'll say 50-50. Because, I mean, I'm kind of right with the team, my team that I love, but is acting stupid. But, I can't do anything about that. I'm not part of the front office. But anyway, like what we said last week, we're going to be talking about the winners and losers of this, of the trade deadline. Then, of course, we're always going to have a little bit of a break and talk about beers, and then, of course, we're going to have our thoughts. But those are later. Right now, let's talk about the winners. Let's talk about the losers of the trade deadline. And really, it's, if you've paid attention to what's been going on with the trade deadline, you obviously kind of know who the winners and losers are by how many people they get, how many big names they get, and all that stuff. Usually that's almost kind of fluff in a way, because you can always get a big guy. Just, for instance, Todd Frazier, a guy that, he's done well, past few years, but really he has a 1.1 WAR. And then you have David Robinson, another guy that the Yankees got, supposed to be the shutout closer, really has a 0 WAR. And that's kind of, your indicator if they're doing well or not. And of course, if you don't know what WAR is by now, it's wins above replacement. And you could say we hardly ever talk about that, because WAR scores really, they tell you if he's doing well or not for the season, and it accumulates over the season. Like, everybody starts with 0, and then it gets accumulated over and over throughout the season, and see what they've done well for. But it also doesn't really tell you what's going on with each player. Would you say that's correct, Phil?
Yeah, because sometimes it can be a little skewed.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, it looks at what they've done as a season as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And, let's say for a certain player, they just had an atrocious April and first half of May.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started turning around in the last month and a half. So they could really have a low WAR score, but if you look at their splits, it could be another story.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, WAR is just, I didn't want to base, like I said, I didn't want to base it all fluff by how many players they got, how many big names they got. I went by kind of just like a WAR score to kind of, go down the list and see really if these players are, actually good or not.
And are they going to have a direct impact on the team?
Yeah, exactly. And, by doing that, I, through the list, I created, this rankings, with all players that got, except for prospects, because prospects don't have WAR scores, and it's just kind of, I guess, kind of redundant in a way that that it's kind of hard to predict what a WAR score could be for prospects. So I just left prospects alone. So, like for the Chicago White Sox, which have, went prospect crazy this trade season, are not going to have huge numbers. And so, like, they actually are the lowest team. Well, they are the lowest positive team, if that's correct. They're at 0. Let's just say that. They're at 0, but they do have one player that was able to be part of the list, and that, of course, was Tyler Clippard, which was part of the one of the first blockbuster trades in the trade deadline season with the Yankees, and he has a 0. So it's like White Sox are pretty much the lowest lowest positive team in with WAR score with 0. Everybody else under that either doesn't have a quote-unquote WAR score because all of their players were prospects, or the players that they got have negative WAR scores. So, besides that, let's get down to business. Let's talk about the winners. Let's talk about the losers. And, looking at it winner-wise, looking at it from the winner standpoint, you have we had kind of, like I said, I made this list of who's who. And of course, you're going to say Chicago Cubs, New York Yankees. They got the guys that they needed. And, then you have the Nationals, Arizona, and a team that I was pretty surprised by WAR score effort is the Kansas City Royals. And, really looking at it, you have Trevor Cahill with a 1.1 WAR score, Brandon Maurer, if I'm saying that correctly, or Maurer, with a 0.9. Then you have Ryan Buchter, which we've been saying Butcher, which that's actually butchering his name in a sense. Even though yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just doing the whatever it's called when someone makes a joke on the snare and the cymbal.
Oh, boom. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the boom part.
Oh, okay.
I heard the and I thought you were about to say something about it. But actually that's okay cuz I did butcher his name. And I'm like waiting, pointing at you, waiting for the boom. All right.
I was looking at his numbers. I wasn't looking at you.
Hey, that's okay. I mean, we do have his numbers up here, but I was also going to say Melky Cabrera, he has a 0.8 WAR score, which brings him up to a nice 2.8, which again, I was not expecting with these numbers, but also you can't really say, with these numbers, like we said, they don't really tell much of a story. And, looking at every player, let's look at Melky Cabrera first. You have his numbers up.
Yeah.
Speak to me in numbers, Phil.
Right now, he is being kind of very Melky Cabrera-ish. He has a 292 average, 333 on base, 431 slugging, 327 weighted on base average, and then a 103 WRC plus and a 0.7 WAR. But you look at what he's given you on strikeouts and walks. He's only striking out 12.3% of the time, and he's only walking 5.8% of the time. And his batting average of balls in play is 308. So they're giving what Melky Cabrera is going to give the Royals is production at DH and corner outfield.
Mm-hmm.
And by corner outfield, I mean left field. But according to Ned Yost, they're going to leave Alex Gordon in and sit Bonifacio.
Which, before we even got on, you went on a little rant. About that.
Because if you look at the two guys, I don't have their numbers pulled up in front of me. Let me pull that up.
But just to fill in the rant of Phil, what he said was just that how it was just ridiculous how Ned Yost wants to keep in Alex Gordon, even though his defense is great, his batting is just atrocious, correct?
Yes, and if you're going to leave in Alex Gordon, okay, fine. Let Bonifacio or Cabrera be the full-time DH, where Brandon Moss is even probably just as worse as Alex Gordon. Because I just got their baseball reference numbers pulled up. Alex Gordon is hitting 203. Brandon Moss is hitting 208. His OPS for Alex Gordon, OPS plus, is a 60. Brandon Moss's is an 81. Jorge Bonifacio has more at-bats than Brandon Moss and 22 less than Alex Gordon, and he's hitting 258 with a 102 OPS plus.
That is not bad at all.
Just by looking at those two numbers, he is by far better than them. And he has more home runs and has one less RBI than Alex Gordon. So his Bonifacio slash line goes 258, 327, 446 with a OPS of a 774. So it doesn't make sense. He does strike out more, but take him out of that number 2 spot, put him down on the bottom of the lineup where he was succeeding earlier when he was called up, could be better.
And, that's kind of the weird thing, too, because with the numbers that Melky Cabrera has, with numbers that Bonifacio has, Gordon, Moss, I wonder how they haven't, not not saying that they're going to release Alex Gordon because they still have him. He's like
two more years
yeah,
at
$2 more
$32 million.
Yeah, and I know that was a ridiculous contract. I think we've said our sentiments before about it on here, but it was just that I wonder how they haven't released Brandon Moss because of how horrible he's hitting right now.
Well, you could see it maybe when Chesler Cuthbert comes back.
Mm-hmm. And they need the room.
Yeah. I don't know if they'll hold on to Brandon Moss or they'll just send Ramon Torres back down to AAA.
Yeah.
Which seems the Royals, if I know anything about them, they'll stay pat and just send Ramon Torres back down.
Oh, I know about standing pat, but that's for later. But yeah, just getting back to Royals' standpoint, looking at the numbers, you also have to look at who else they traded on the other side. They got Trevor Cahill, Brandon Maurer, and Ryan Buchter. And looking at those numbers, Trevor Cahill, even though he has a high ERA, his FIP, his fielding independent pitching, is a 381. So he actually does have some stuff. It's just that it's a little bit skewed in a way towards the defense with his ERA. But if you also look at his other numbers, he has a 72.8% left on base percentage. He's a ground ball pitcher with 56.7. If you look at his K rate, it's a 10.25. Well, K per 9, it's a 10.25. His walks per 9 is a 3.6. And that's really good for what they need. Even though looking at this list that I have up for the others that we're going to be talking about later on, he has what it seems like to me the highest opponent BABIP with a 337. But if you also look at the other guys here, he has Brandon Maurer. Even though he's been in more games than Trevor Cahill, but there's a difference because one's a pitcher and one's a reliever. Brandon Maurer, even though he has a better WAR score of a .9, he has right now an ERA of 5.36, even though his FIP does give him a better number at 3.10. Then you have him having a really abysmal left on base percentage, not necessarily the lowest with the list that we have here that we're going to talk about, but he has a 58.2. His opponent BABIP is a 322. He does have that really nice spread with his K per 9 and his walks per 9 with a pure 9 with a K per 9 and a 1.93 walks per 9. And then of course Ryan Buchter, he's kind of right now the good-looking one in a sense. He has a 2.95 ERA, but his FIP says that he has a 4.66. Then you have him with an 84.2% left on base percentage, and his opponent's BABIP is a 2.28. And I don't think you can really do any better with a guy that that is quote unquote giving you a 0 WAR score. But looking at this, with Ryan Buchter having a 10.66 K per 9, this was kind of, like I said, was kind of a steal in a way for the Kansas City Royals because, they
didn't give up a whole, we talked about it last week when this trade was made. They gave up a guy that was on the DL. Mm-hmm. They gave up a guy like Travis Wood who has not been pitching well. And then they gave up an 18-year-old prospect that we won't see for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So, and even with the Melky Cabrera trade, they traded A.J. Puckett, which was their second-round 2015 pick, and then Andre Davis, another good prospect, but not superstar status or anything like that. And so they walked out of this trade deadline improving their team without losing their top 3 prospects.
Yeah, and, really, and if you compare that to, the Cubs, to the Yankees, a little bit of the Nats and the Diamondbacks, the 4 teams right in front of them, they probably, comparing, how deep a cut they got, it was just more of a nick, while the other guys really had deep wounds because the Cubs, they gave up Eloy Jimenez. Let me get this up real quick so I can read every name that they gave up for. They gave up Eloy Jimenez, Matt Rose, Dylan Cease, and Brian Fleet for for Jose Quintana, to the White Sox. Then you have the Yankees kind of doing the same thing. They gave up Ian Clarkin and Blake Rutherford, which are really two guys that have really done well in the minors. Blake Rutherford, I believe he was like number 1 or number 2 in the top 30 organizationals. And, that's kind of, that's kind of a deep cut for them, giving up guys that are top this, top that, all that stuff. And then you look at the Royals, which have done, looking at it is kind of, it's on par. It's not, not nothing splashy names like Quintana or Yu Darvish, but they're getting the job done through the WAR score, and that's why they're 5th. And that's above the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Orioles, which is another team which I was surprised by, the Rockies, teams that are in the mix with, with what's going on to the playoffs.
Yeah. And so it just kind of says that, to make your team better doesn't mean you need to go out and get that one superstar pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of gut, because the Royals did that in 2015 for Johnny Cueto and Ben Zobrist.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't afford to make another move like that.
Mm-hmm. And, maybe it will turn out to be a good thing. I mean, I don't know if Ryan Buchter and Mauer have done anything for the Royals. I haven't watched them since that trade.
They've been all right. There's been a couple stumbles, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're coming over from the NL and playing in the AL, the superior hitting league.
It's okay. We're the superior pitching league, supposedly.
Supposedly.
I mean, hashtag pitchers who rake, right? But another team besides the Royals, that was kind of our surprise team. Really
surprise winner. Because again, we could talk about the Cubs, we could talk about the Yankees. Go ahead. After they made the trade for their pitchers, I kind of thought they'd be done.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the back of my mind, I wanted them to go get another hitter.
Yeah.
I just didn't think they would be able to pull something off or afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. So that's just nice to see from an organization that kind of recognizes that this is one of their last years with their core players.
Yes, a very, very small window left for the Royals unless somehow donors from all across the country that are Royals fans start paying for
Hosmer's and Moustakas'
contracts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
because Dayton Moore's going to have to choose between one or the other,
or none of them, or both of them.
I swear to God, it better be one or the other.
I mean, both of them would be hilarious because everybody's been talking about it's going to be one or the other, and if it's both, I guess it's a good thing for Royals Nation.
Watch it be Alcides Escobar.
Oh God, no, I don't think Escobar's going to get anything. I think
neither do I, and
yeah.
Talking to my dad, who's also a big Royals fan, he wants to keep Lorenzo Cain. I don't. Because if you sign Lorenzo Cain, that means you can't keep Moose or Hosmer.
Mm-hmm.
So why not just spend all your money on Moose and Hosmer,
who
are both having – Hosmer's hitting over 300. Moustakas has over 30 home runs and a good 270 average.
Mm-hmm.
And – with Escobar, you got a guy down in the minors with Mondesi who's hitting over 300 in AAA right now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, he, just a little quick thing.
Whit Merrifield has entrenched himself at second base.
Mm-hmm.
We got Bonifacio in right field.
Mm-hmm.
If Hunter Dozier can come back and be healthy, they got a guy that can play DH in left field. So they really just need to go out and get a center fielder.
Mm-hmm. And, another thing real quick, it's like Raul Mondesi, he just needs to, work
Have
on
a full year.
Yeah, have a full year, get a, nice bat going up in the majors, and he'll be fine. I mean,
Yeah, it's just if you've ever taken a look at his career, he was rushed through every system, every league he played in, starting because he came into the league playing rookie ball at 17 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then that next year he was rushed through high A, then he was rushed through double A, then he was rushed through triple A, then he was in the majors.
Mm-hmm.
And you just saw it. He was overmatched. And then he gets down there and he plays. He's had over 300 at bats, close to it now in AAA, and he's hitting over 300.
Mm-hmm.
So let him stay down there, ride it out, and then when the season's over down there, call him up mid-September and just let him have at it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hell, September call-ups is our next thing. Really, next big thing.
And with Mondesi, if they do it, I wouldn't be surprised if they put him on the playoff roster because of his speed.
Mm-hmm.
You saw him do it in 2015 with Terrence Gore.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of situation. He won't get any at bats, but they'll put him on the base pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that worked. They got him they got a title out of it. So,
yep.
I mean, what else? I mean, as the Royals organization, I think this was, again, we can go through everything. This was a really good haul for the Royals. I mean, if you
without
also
giving up too much.
Yeah. And if you also look at what's kind of interesting, though, also is if you look at every article that has been written so far about the trade deadline, from what I've seen yesterday, a little bit today before we got on, none of them are really talking about the Royals being quote-unquote winners. But that also doesn't mean that they're quote-unquote losers of the trade deadline. So they're just in that purgatory middle ground where it's like some see them as winners, some see them as losers, but sometimes the stats are the facts, and you have the Royals number 5 on our WAR score list for being, for getting guys that are, able to do stuff, and that's kind of a good thing for the Royals. And besides the Royals, we have to say, we've kind of hinted at the other top 5 clubs, the Cubs, the Yankees, the Nats, and the D-backs. And we could say stuff about the Cubs. We could say stuff about the Yankees. The Yankees, really the top 3 teams, that's the Cubs, the Yankees, and the Nationals, the Naturals. That should be their name. Get rid of that Walgreens W. But, really looking at those clubs, they've really answered what they needed. And that was kind of the same thing with the Royals. You try to trade to get what your needs. And
that's what the Nationals did.
Yeah, and I think the Nationals out of the top 3, the Cubs did what they can do with money, and they have that really ridiculous farm system. They can get whoever they wanted. I mean, the Cubs got Justin Wilson and Alex Villa from the Tigers. Then they got Jose Quintana. And, those guys, really looking at it, Quintana was kind of the guy that they needed, and Wilson. Not necessarily catcher position, but really looking at it also, they kind of needed a backup catcher right behind Wilson Contreras. And that was kind of the thing that the Cubs, the Cubs needed this, needed that, but it wasn't as important because getting past, the All-Star break to now, the Cubs are doing fine. They're actually winning games. They're not, meddling between wins and losses.
And they're back on top of their division.
Yeah, they're back on top of the division. And with the Yankees, it's been a rough one for them. They're kind of in a fight with the Boston Red Sox. And really they kind of needed, guys in the back. So they got Sonny Gray, which was, kind of it was expected
that he would go somewhere.
But for me, of course, I have to stay, unbiased. I do not like the Yankees, but I have to stay unbiased. And they did trade the right guys for him. Of course, James Caprillion is a guy that I've heard that name many of times, through the minor league baseball app. And Sonny Gray, I knew he was going to go somewhere. Wish it wasn't the Yankees, but the Yankees did what they needed to do. But what was weird is that they got Jaime Garcia from the Twins. And so that was just like, all right, if you look at the rotation, you have CC Sabathia, you have Luis Severino, you have Masahiro Tanaka, then you would have Jaime Garcia and Sonny Gray. But of course that's not, really positioning them, through the rotation. That's just your rotation by name. And that rotation, really surpasses, some of the top teams' rotations. You have to look at the Diamondbacks, a team that's kind of, that has been, oddly in the hunt since day one. That better rotation than that. They were somewhat equal. They had, if you look at the Diamondbacks, they had Greinke, they had Robbie Ray.
Is there any update on Robbie Ray?
Robbie Ray, from my understanding, which if you haven't heard or seen, which has been, a couple days now since Thursday, Robbie Ray got hit in the head during the Cardinals game by a baseball from Luke Voigt. It was pretty dramatic, but I think he's day to day, I believe, but I haven't really checked the injury reports as of late. But I mean, besides that, you got to look, then you got to look
I can give you an update real quick.
Yeah, go right on ahead.
Ray has 3 staples in the left side of his head over an area that was visibly bruised. He also has a concussion. The first of his career, was placed on the 7-day concussion disabled list. But he said a CT scan showed no fracture in his skull, no internal bleeding, nothing resembles sort of life-threatening injuries. Other pitchers have came away with being struck by line drives.
Yeah. Just another.
So it sounds like he has a.
Yeah.
What was
that?
Ahead.
No, just go ahead. Go ahead.
Quote from him: "I got 18 hours of sleep the other day. And I'm just really slow right now. Body is moving really slow. I'm just trying to get things back to normal. Other than that, really, I had a headache the first day, but don't have that anymore. I can definitely tell there's some staples in my head. It's been pulling a skin a little bit. Other than that, not a whole lot."
And, I'm happy that he's healthy. And that's really a good sign to hear, folks.
Yeah, and if he misses a little bit of time for it, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. And I mean that's always going to happen with if a pitcher gets injured. But getting back to real quick, I'm just getting up the rest of the Dodger pitching. You have Patrick Corbin and Taijuan Walker, guys that I shouldn't have missed, but I did. Guys that have done well, and it's just that the Yankees surpassed that team. Then you look at, it's kind of hard to get surpast the Red Sox, but they're right there with the Red Sox.
Yeah, the Red Sox made a good trade. They went out and got Addison Reed from the Mets, and then who else did they? And then they went out and got Eduardo Nunez, someone to fill in that third base gap for them.
Yeah.
So they didn't really. We talked about it. We talked that they needed a reliever, that they needed a utility infielder. They got both of those things. This is hitting over 300. Addison Reed is a good pitcher. Do we have him pulled up? Nope.
No, I did not pull him up because I wasn't thinking of talking about the Red Sox.
That's true. That's true. But we don't have to look him up. But he's a good reliever, and that's what they needed.
Yeah, and Reed has done well for the Mets, which the Mets have not done well at all. And really, if you look at the Yankees, Sonny Gray, Jaime Garcia, again, being in that rotation is going to be really, really key down the stretch against this Red Sox rotation, which, of course, has David Price, even though he's injured at the moment. They have Rick Porcello. They have Chris Sale. And there's just a lot of guys with these, with the top clubs, I should say, that really have good to substantial rotations. Of course, the Nats have a really good rotation. Gio Gonzalez last night had a no-hitter. He was pulled out in the 8th. Well, pulled out in the 9th. But, I mean, the Nats have a good rotation. The Royals, they have a middle-of-the-road rotation, but it's good enough to get stuff done, even though it's been mostly offense, would you say?
Yes.
And
it's been they've had a really potent offense this last 20 games, where, their last 20 games, they're 11-9. Last 10, they're 8-2. Last 30, they're 18-20. 18-12, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And their offense has come alive of late. Their bullpen pitching has been from July, I want to say 4th until July 28th. Their bullpen ERA was a 1.94.
Mm-hmm.
So their back of the bullpen has started to be better.
Mm-hmm.
But their question with them has always been the starting rotation because they're getting good. They're getting career year out of Vargas. Danny Duffy's pitching well. Jason Hamill has come alive of late. Ian Kennedy's starting to get better. Trevor Cahill kind of got beat up in his first start.
Mm-hmm.
He only pitched 4 innings with 11.25 ERA.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully he can get better. And then their bullpen, Peter Moylan has been pretty much untouchable by right-handed pitching.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Alexander is a nice addition. Mike Minor's doing well. Soria's doing well. The only problem with them is Kelvin Herrera has not adjusted well to the closer role.
And, yeah, I knew that Kelvin Herrera was having a little bit of problems.
I keep forgetting. They went out and got Nefertiti Feliz as well. With Feliz, in his 14 innings pitched with the Royals, he's only allowed 4 runs with a 2.57 ERA. So they have other options later in the innings with Mauer, Buchter, and Feliz if Herrera and Soria are starting to have problems.
Mm-hmm.
So they beefed up their bullpen. They went out and got their number 5 starter they needed in Cahill because of Nathan Karn's injury. So, if anything, this team should only be better.
Yeah, and it's going to get better. I mean, with this team, like you said, they got a good, I said decent rotation. They got a good bullpen. Then you got to look at, other teams besides the ones that we said, and a team that really, is 7th in our list, but really did some damage for pitching-wise, has been the Los Angeles Dodgers. They got Darvish.
You mean them just throwing up their middle finger everywhere?
Pretty much. And a lot of people have said the same thing. And, really looking at it,
they went out and got relief pitching. They went out and got starting pitching.
Yeah.
They gave up quite a bit for it. But, they're leading the league in wins. They have the best record in the league at 74-31. And they arguably will have the best rotation when it's going to go Kershaw, Darvish, and Alex Wood.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's what I was going to say. You have the Dodgers, with this really good rotation. You have the Dodgers with already a good bullpen. But if you really look at it, you have, in the rotation, you would have, of course, Darvish, Kershaw, Alex Wood, which he's done really well. Then you have Rich Hill and then Brandon McCarthy. And also, you have Kenta Maeda and Ryu, if I said that, Ryunjin Ryu. But, Ryu the other night did well. I believe he went 6 innings in the outing against the San Francisco Giants. But if you really want the top 5, you're going to go Darvish, you're going to go Kershaw, Wood, Maeda, and Ryu. And that starting rotation is going to be devastating. And then you add Tony Watson, which, by WAR score hasn't done well this year with a negative .1, but it kind of counteracts with Tony Cingrani.
A good ERA.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, with Watson, he has a good ERA.
Mm-hmm.
He has a good left-on-base percentage. Doesn't have a high strikeout rate. Doesn't have a high walk rate either.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to give you consistency in the middle innings.
Mm-hmm. And, and then you have, but you kind of counteract with those with, having Kenley Jansen, Pedro Baez, and Brandon Morrow, even though he's only had 11% of the pitching throughout this season. Then you have Grant Dayton and Ron Stripling and other guys too. And then, they got another guy too that really bolstered their bullpen, and Tony Cingrani, and which he came from the Reds, and he was doing okay. I mean, through the stats, if you look at it, 5.40 ERA, which is not that great, and his FIP was a 7.01, but he has that nice high strikeouts per 9 with a 9.26, that low walks per 9 with a 2.31, and his left-on base percentage is a 92.8. And also I should add that his opponent's BABIP is a 271. So yeah, even though he has a high ERA, again, this is just throughout the whole season. I mean, possibly recently he's done well to really be a part of this. Is that it's interesting to see that even though the Dodgers were already set, they're the best team in all of baseball. Like you said, they gave the middle finger to everybody else in the major leagues and being like, "We're here to play. We're not gonna stand pat during the trade deadline. We're gonna do something." They get Darvish, they get Tony Watson, they get Tony Cingrani, and it just shows that they're ready to win a World Series title. And the Cubs and the Yankees with those, like I said, with those rotations are good. I don't think it could surpass this Dodgers rotation.
Yeah, no, it really can't. It just like the numbers you listed between Yu Darvish and Clayton Kershaw alone. If they just had just those two pitchers, that rotation's scary.
Mm-hmm.
But you're getting the production out of Alex Wood. You're getting good production out of Rich Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon McCarthy is also pitching well. So, like everything you said, there's not a whole lot else you could really do.
Mm-hmm.
And even their bullpen pitching, they were before they went out and got Watson and other guy, I can't say his name.
Oh, Cingrani?
Yeah, Cingrani. I couldn't remember it. Josh Fields was pitching well for him.
Mm-hmm.
Luis
Avian.
Yeah. That L in the middle threw me off.
Mm-hmm.
But he was pitching well for him. So was Ross Stripling. So, like, they just went full all in here, pushed all the chips in the middle of the table and said, if we don't make it to the World Series with these kind of guys, what else can we do?
And especially, what's been going on kind of outside trade-wise with the Dodgers. They get a guy, let's say this, 2 years in a row, they've found some really good rookie pieces. You have Corey Seager from last year at the shortstop spot, and then Cody Bellinger, which he's done well out in the outfield, but also has done well, as first base while Adrian Gonzalez has been injured. And I think that it's kind of the interesting thing that if this team doesn't do well, it's kind of they're cursed in a way. And I know that sounds a little bit archaic, but it's just that this team is so stacked, and the trade deadline just made them even more stacked. They are the house, and usually when you have the house, you're going to be as the house. They're always going to be stacked. and they're always going to win. The house always wins. And right now, they're looking like the team that they are the house. Even though we have the Cubs that won it last year, they were the team that really cemented their lineup with Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, but that rotation was doing well last year. And even though their relief core was a little bit here and there, this year it hasn't done much besides the last few weeks since the All-Star break has really showed them up. And I really can't say much about who the winners or losers, the winners of the trade deadline, because we've already talked about it. The Cubs have done well. Score-wise, they have a 5.4 or 5.3. I don't have those numbers up. Let me check real quick. 5.3. The Yankees have a 5.2. Really two teams that really pushed the envelope during the trade season in the MLB. Then you have the Nats really going after what they needed with Sean Doolittle, Ryan Matson, and Brandon Knitzler. And they also got a utility guy, which you brought up earlier with Howie Kendrick, guys that they really needed. The D-backs kind of did what they needed to do. They got, they got J.D. Martinez, a guy that plays well out in the outfield, really to help out Yasmani Tomas in that situation. Then they got Adam Rosales, which is another infield guy. Nothing major. Like he's nothing to be. He's kind of that util guy. And then they got David Hernandez, which is a reliever, which he's, to my knowledge, has really done, decently well throughout the season. But really, the winners the winner side is pretty much, I could say like the Dodgers, pretty much stacked. If you look at the numbers, a lot of people did well. Like I said, the Cubs, the Yankees, the Nats, the D-backs, the Royals. The Red Sox did well, even though they don't have the quote-unquote, they do have the number by WAR score, but not, wasn't really splashy. The Dodgers, really splashy, but not a whole lot of, not a whole lot with the WAR score. But, Phil, do you have anything to say about another club that are part of the winners or thoughts?
Well, kind of the dark horse of the winners would be the Chicago White Sox.
Mm-hmm. And you're right.
I guess not even a dark horse. They know what they needed to do to rebuild, and they went out and did it. They got some of the top tier prospects that will be able to produce for the club in 2018 and 2019, and then they got a lot of prospects that would be producing for them in 2020 and over. Mm-hmm. So they've kind of set themselves up for a good 7 to 10 year future.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's kind of what's been going on. Real quick to go down the line of who they got during the trade deadline prospect wise. Casey Gillespie, which he's a first base prospect, got him from the Rays. Then you got AJ Puckett and Andre Davis from the Royals. Then you have Ryan Cordell from the Brewers, which he's a outfielder. Then you have, with the Jose Quintana trade, Brian Fleet, Dylan Cease, Eloy Jimenez, Matt Rose out of that Jose Quintana trade. Then you have Ian Clark and Blake Relaford. And then you can, somewhat talk about Jean Maki and Mark Lowe, which those guys are, prospects in a way, but nothing to really really look over
or write home about.
Yeah, write home about.
But they will be good for you,
yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah, and even though the White Sox are not quote-unquote winners by WAR score, they're winners by getting the prospects that they need for the future.
And that's what they needed. They knew they were going to this season as a rebuild. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they didn't start selling off too early because you never want to. Mm-hmm. But they sold off at the right time to the right people and got a prospect system that's going to rank in the top 10. Mm-hmm. So, good for them.
Yeah,
I'm going to hate it, but good for them.
Yeah, that's always going to be a pain to see somebody doing really well in your division. But I mean,
Yep.
what can you do? And you're going to have winners. You're going to have teams that have meddled, which is not necessarily bad in a sense or necessarily good. They got guys that they need. I mean, you could talk about the Pirates. You could talk about the Athletics. You could talk about, the Indians. You can talk about the Brewers. Teams that got guys, but it wasn't bad or it wasn't good. But now you got to talk about the losers. And you always got to have losers when there's winners. And really, two teams, in my opinion, that really stand out are the Astros and the Cardinals. The Cardinals is more of
They didn't do anything?
standing pat, even though they are 4.5 games back from the leader.
They did get a nice guy in Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah, which is another thing. They got a prospect for the future, but
who theoretically should be up with you all in September and should be in your starting lineup next year.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's that possibility. No doubt that there is that type of possibility. But it would
have been nice to see them go out and do a little bit more for the fan base, because, like you said, they're only 4.5 games back of the division, and there's really not a chance for them to catch the wild card because they're 8.5 back from that.
7.5 by
7.5. Okay.
MLB.com standards.
But
I mean,
7.5 back because the Diamondbacks and the Rockies are tied at 60 games apiece. So if they were going to make a run, maybe they just saw it as they wouldn't be able to maintain a run to the division, and instead of sell off, maybe even sell. At that point,
my thing was just do something, make a clear indication that you're either A, trying to go to the playoffs this year, or B, save yourselves for this year and just try all next year. And that's what they didn't do. Both. They didn't do one or the other, I should say. And that's where it kind of gets a little bit disappointing with the fan base. Mike Matheny has already said a couple things about the fan base, how they're disappointed, but this is his team. He can do whatever the hell he wants, pretty much. And really, if you just look at it from a standpoint, like I said, they're only 4.5 games back from the Chicago Cubs. Right now, the last 10 games, they are 4-6. They beat the Arizona Diamondbacks. I think if I'm correct from memory, they split that series with them. And, they're going to be facing a team today and through the next couple of days. It will be against Milwaukee, a team that's ahead of them, by a couple of games. They're 55-52, the Milwaukee Brewers, the St. Louis Cardinals 52-53. But with these wins, I think we'll, kind of, if they'd win, I should say, it should change the tide a little bit. And if they feel confident with these guys, we got to, as a fan base, if they're confident with these guys, we got to be confident with them. But the thing is, I would have been okay with it if they've said something about, hey, we're not going to do anything about it during the trade deadline. We're not going to do, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Or we're going to do this, going to do that. But it was just nothing. They did nothing besides the trade with Tyler O'Neill and Marco Gonzalez, which I hope Marco Gonzalez does have he restarts his life somewhere else in baseball. He just, after his injuries, he wasn't going to make it to the majors. And I think the trade was good for him, and I think the trade was good for us. But that was it. They didn't do anything to really help their bullpen. They didn't really do anything to help their offense per se, either, in the infield or in the outfield. And overall, it's going to be a difficult one to watch if everything is close and the Cardinals don't make it at the end, because they could have done something at the trade
like
deadline.
The Royals of 2013.
Yeah,
because they were making a run for that wild card spot, and they just didn't have enough juice to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the Cardinals, they're falling below 500 right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Brewers and the Cubs obviously upgraded, and the Cardinals didn't. So who's to say that they just kind of stay where they're at and just kind of ride this out for next year?
Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, it's okay whatever they do. It's the fan base just wants answers. That's all it is. And if the Cardinals, are either just above 500 or just below it or at it, I don't think it will be a total loss of a season. But with this 4.5 games back from the division-leading Chicago Cubs, which are 7-3 in the last 10 games, like I said, with the St. Louis Cardinals 6-4, and the Milwaukee Brewers, I should also add, that are 3-7, haven't done really well since the All-Star break. It's just that I think a lot of fan bases want to go after it, and if they are trying to save, quote unquote gas for next year, I think they could have said something about it. And that's where a lot of people get hurt. They get upset, which I'm, a little part of that. But it's also kind of a time to see if we don't make it into the playoffs, but we still have a 500 record, do we keep Mike Matheny? And, well, do they keep Mike Matheny? I keep on saying we, but I'm not part of the organization. And looking at it, it's time to decide whether Matheny is really the guy or not, even though they give him an extension till 2020, I believe. And, yeah, I believe so. It would happen earlier this season. So it's just this point where it's just, where is this team going to go? And by standing pat, it just shows that, A, they have the confidence with their guys that they already have, but B, upsets the fan base by not doing anything and to show somewhat of a try to get the dominance back over to the Cardinals side than the Cubs side.
Yeah, and there's really not much else that can be said about it.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of went out. They made a move that helped them in the corner outfield where they've lacked consistency this year. Mm-hmm. And they didn't obviously feel like they could upgrade without selling off too much.
And that's the possibility too. And you have a lot of guys that I've seen through the minor league system that have done well. Luke Weaver, Jack Flaherty, Magneuris Sierra, Oscar Mercado has been another guy that's been doing well. And hell, even guys that are up there now. Paul DeYoung, Luke Voigt, Harrison Bader, the newest guy.
It could be as simple as kind of what the Phillies are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the Padres.
Mm-hmm.
Letting their prospects just trial by fire here.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're going to come to expect. Let's grow together.
Mm-hmm. Which, I've talked about it many times when we talk about out of the park baseball. That's how I kind of want to see it. As a GM, you want to go through your system. You don't want to pay a lot of money for free agents unless you need to. But it just wasn't the way that it just wasn't, I guess, explained or told from the front office to the fan base that that's what they're trying to do. But
most GMs and stuff won't do that, though.
True. That is true. But also, remember the GM. I mean, you have to look at Ken Williams too. The GM of I believe that's his name, Ken Williams, the GM of the Chicago White Sox. They talked about rebuilding, and that's what you got to expect. For the Cardinals, the Cardinal fan base, we've been spoiled. And, with playoff appearances, championships, pennant titles, everything else, sometimes we do need a little bit of an explanation once in a while. Because, when you're coming off of, 9 years 6 years in a row, we've been in the Cardinals have been into the playoffs.
That must feel nice.
Yeah. And we only missed the playoffs the Cardinals, I need to stop saying we, but the Cardinals haven't only since 2000 haven't been in the playoffs twice.
Please complain some more.
I know. I shouldn't be complaining, but
exactly. So that's what it is. The fan base should not be complaining.
They shouldn't be complaining, but I'm complaining because if they're gonna go through the system, at least tell the fan base.
Why they gotta explain to the fan base anything? The Royals didn't.
You've heard of the hashtag that I like to call out from time to time. The hashtag BFIB, best fans in baseball.
Yeah, and it's
sometimes you gotta
because you guys are literally not the best fans in baseball.
Sometimes you gotta explain the quote unquote best fans in baseball once in a while. You
just gotta break it down and talk real slow.
Oh man, I love that. I love that hashtag. I really do, because it's just. It is.
Oh, I'm sure it's a dumpster fire right now.
Oh, it is. A lot of people in the fan base are really upset that the Cardinals didn't do anything, and I'm upset too, because I want them to be in the playoffs with the 4.5 games back from the division, and a little bit of something could have happened. And then, yeah, you're right. The GMs, the president of baseball operations, don't have to tell the fan base.
Shit. They don't have to tell them anything.
Do this, do that. They're trying to keep a quote unquote card up their sleeve. In those
keep
just
a tight
in
lip.
case. Yeah, keep a tight lip. And I think it's just. I think it's just because of the meddling season, for me at least. There just needed to be an explanation why the Cardinals didn't do anything during the trade deadline. And, of course, I can say it again. 4.5 games back. There's guys in AAA that's done well. You can bring those guys up if you want. I mean, St. Louis, organization. But that's where it's just kind of been the what's really going on here. And I think it just needs to be a breather. I think a couple of days. Of course, if St. Louis sweeps the Brewers, I don't think really anybody's going to be upset anymore. But if the Cardinals either lose the series or get swept, then of course the fan base is going to get louder and more upset. They're going to start riots in the streets.
Yes, for 1 year not making the playoffs.
Well, it would be the second year not making it to the playoffs.
Oh my God, how would you all survive 26 years?
I don't know. I don't know, Phil.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Been
god awful.
Yeah, and I think it's we'll have a discussion about the state of Missouri baseball someday on the show, but not today.
Moving on to our last loser.
Yes, the last loser. A team that actually did try.
They tried, but they tried with the wrong guy here.
Yes.
The Astros went out and got Francisco Liriano.
Mm-hmm.
They traded Nori Aoki and Teoscar Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
And they signed reliever Jumbo Diaz to a minor league deal.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at Francisco Liriano right now, he's a left-handed pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
He so far has pitched in 18 games, 82 and 2/3 innings, has a 65.5% left on base, a 5.88 ERA, and his FIP and xFIP aren't going to help him here either, with a 4.72 and a 5.02 and a .8 WAR.
Mm-hmm.
He's striking out less than a guy an inning. Has a high walk rate with a 4.68 per 9. He's letting up a home run a game. His batting average of balls in play is at 327.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just not a very good pitcher. And it's just kind of an odd move.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have Marwin Gonzalez who can play left field.
Mm-hmm.
So moving Aoki's not a bad idea. But George Springer's on the 10-day DL right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Aoki wasn't playing bad with the 272 average either.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have Jake Marinzek as well, but he's only hitting 259. And if you look at their starting pitching, they didn't really need an upgrade at starting pitching, though Joe Musgrove hasn't pitched well.
Mm-hmm.
But they got Colin McHugh. I don't like that.
I don't like that name.
But they got a guy like that, and so it just didn't make a lot of sense for them to go out and get a back end of the rotation guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been a lot of talks with them with Yu Darvish and Sonny Gray, and they could have even used help in the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
Because Michael Feliz isn't pitching well. Tony Sipp is not pitching well. They got Brad Peacock that is pitching well.
Mm-hmm.
And so is Ken Giles and Chris Stefanitsky.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really it. And if you look at what Jumbo Diaz is doing for the Rays in 30 innings, had a 5.70 ERA, 4.52 FIP, and a 5.22 xFIP with a .2 WAR.
Mm-hmm.
And again, high walk rate, low strikeout rate.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't really help themselves.
Yeah, that was,
And there's really not a whole lot.
ahead.
Like you can't really say like much about it either because that's what it is. They made a move. They didn't trade any of their prospects, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really help themselves here.
Yeah, and you brought it up a couple, just a minute ago. You brought up that they didn't, in my opinion, they didn't even try to get Sonny Gray or Yu Darvish, which, of course, would have been hard because it's in division, and it's always hard to get somebody from in division.
The Athletics, I think, would have been more conducive to do it.
Yes, and you're right in a sense. They would have been a team that would have been okay with it because they're not really challenging,
And is Sonny Gray going
to
to sign with the Astros at the end of the season?
I don't.
No, I was talking about if the Astros were to get him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, also, I think they would. But also, if you think about it, he would have been on the team for a couple more years because he's still.
Oh, is he still team controlled?
Mm-hmm.
It's Yu Darvish that's the free agent.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I got those two. I got the two contracts mixed up.
Darvish is the guy that is the free agent that everybody wanted. Sonny Gray has 2 more years after this year of arbitration. Then he'll be open for free agency.
Okay.
So, I mean, it will be, kind of up in the air to see what will happen. And, I mean, the stroke, you also have to look at this, too. The Astros are up by 16 games in their division, with the Mariners, being the second team. But you also have to look at the Seattle Mariners. They're, just a real quick thing. The Seattle Mariners are doing their own thing. They got a couple guys that will jettison them up possibly to the wild card spot depending on what happens. And I get that the reason why they didn't go all out is because they've already cemented their spot in the playoffs and they're already doing well. And I think another thing too, it's not as bad as the 2014 Oakland Athletics where they gave up a big-name guy to get a big-name guy. They gave up Cespedes for Jeff Samardzija and and I think it was John Lester that they gave up. Samardzija was just another trade. But it was just that they went from one extreme to the next, and you can tell, and the Oakland Athletics just faltered. Houston might have had that same thought, but it's still, like you said, Francisco Liriano not doing so well. Jumbo Diaz not doing so well. So that's where it falters for the Houston Astros. And
yeah, that's kind of what it is. Like they could have used some help, better help in the bullpen, and Jumbo Diaz isn't that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Chris Stephenitsky is eating up a lot of innings right now with 60 innings already pitched.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to have to start relying on guys like Feliz, Gregerson, and Sip. And all of those guys have +4 ERAs.
Mm-hmm.
So it just doesn't make sense. I'm just kind of confused.
Confused like the Royals trade. Well, actually, the Royals trade was confusing but good. This is just confusing and bad.
Yeah, because the Melky Cabrera trade, it was confusing because it happened and no one had linked that, and there has been no talk of it, and it happened. You're like, at first when I got the notification, I'm like, that can't be real.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously it was. So that's good. They made an obvious upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
The Astros did not make an obvious upgrade here.
Mm-hmm. And it almost, to a sense, kind of downgraded stats-wise. Not necessarily. Francisco Liriano could come down to Houston and just, start throwing heat.
Could. Very well could. But I don't see that happening because he's already had 18 games pitched already.
Yes.
And he's kind of, that's more than halfway through his starts because they get about 32 starts a year. So he has 14 starts left. What else do you want to see out of him?
Mm-hmm.
You could make the argument if he had these kind of numbers in his first 4 or 5 starts that he could get better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the argument was after his 4th and 5th start.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, it's Liriano. He'll turn it around. And he's not turning it around.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of attitude doesn't win you ball games.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. And you're totally right with that. And you can kind of tell that Houston is really trusting the offense more than the pitching. Of course, like I said, Liriano could come down to Houston and throw fire and start doing well. But it looks like it's going to be coming down to the offense because Dallas Keuchel, he's done well, but he's been injured. Then you have Colin McHugh, which he's done well, but he's been injured. And, another guy that has done well but has been injured has been Mike Fiers, Charlie Morton, all those guys. And Lance McCullers.
Yeah, and if you've watched the AL playoffs with the Astros, their downfall has never been their offense.
Mm-hmm.
It's been their middle rotation and bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think they would try to beef that up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they know something about Liriano that we don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't see it that way.
Yeah, and yeah, I kind of feel the same way. When I saw that, I was kind of disappointed. I was disappointed at the fact that the Houston Astros kind of just didn't do anything about it. So, that's it. That's about the winners and the losers. And Phil, do you have anything else to say about the winners and losers? The Astros and the Cardinals definitely in their type of situations are losers. We could talk about the Minnesota Twins, which have taken from, okay, we're going to be buyers to sellers within a week, which has been kind of funny. But
they kind of recognize where they were at, though, in the division,
mm-hmm.
where they were at in the wild card.
Mm-hmm.
They had a good first half of the season. They're already 6.5 back of the Indians. And if they're in the wild card hunt, they're at least 4 or 3.5 back.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so they recognized it, didn't sell off a whole lot, and hopefully it can rebound.
Yes. And that's going to do it here for us for the first half of our podcast. We're going to take a little quick break, and then we'll be right back with not only our thoughts about, just our random thoughts about the trade deadline with other teams, but also future thoughts about the future of the rest of the season. So for us, for the MLBeers podcast, we are going to take a break. And we're back, folks, for the second half of the MLBeers podcast. And, of course, we got to talk about the second part of our name, the beers portion of our podcast. And before I get to you, Phil, I know you're going to be disappointed with me with this, but no beer for me today. I have to go into work later on, and I don't want people to somewhat smell the scent of alcohol.
That's what a shower and brushing your teeth will do.
That is true. But I am still not going to do that. But I know. Shame on me, like the Cardinals.
Shame.
But that happens from time to time. So besides all of that and other things as well, what are you drinking, by the way?
Just cracked open a cold one.
With the boys.
I'm drinking all day session IPA from Founders.
Nice. Is it the tall can? Oh, the short can.
My liquor store had the 15-pack on sale for $14.99.
Oh wow, that's a deal.
Yeah,
that is a deal, folks. If you've never tried the all day IPA session IPA,
it comes in at 4.7%. That's why they call it an all day session IPA. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today is just like session beers.
Okay.
Because if you're doing something like this where you're on a podcast for 2 or 3 hours, you can drink those heavy, high ABV beers, but you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel it quick.
That is true. There's been, I think there was a couple of times.
There's been a couple episodes where I've been...
where you felt it and I've felt it, so...
Yep. We've been there. And so I want to try something a little new today, and this beer is good for that because it's something you could really, if you're going to drink all day, drink this. Because it's light, it does have that nice IPA-ness to it, where it's hoppy, it's bitter, it's full-flavored, but it's only 4.7%.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is, too, like I brought up, that it's in, the 16-ounce cans or the tall boy cans.
The tall boys are 19.2-ounce cans.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it...
Have you had one of those?
Yeah, actually...
I have not been able to get one of the tall boy cans.
Actually, 2 things. I got one at a bar down here. And I guess they kind of got stuff from Founders. Some swag and all that stuff. So not only did I get the can, the 19-ounce can, but I got a really, really cool koozie with it.
Oh, that came with it?
That came with the can.
So it was like a big, not appropriate sized koozie.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So that's why that's why I asked if you were having the tall boy or not.
See, I have not been able to find them. I'm sure if I go to Columbia, I would be able to find them. But here in town, they just have the 15 packs, and I haven't bought them. And then I just went to the liquor store last night, and the manager knows me. He's like, "Hey, I marked these down to $14.99 because I only have 2 left. I'm like, I'll take one.
Should have taken both.
I had the wife with me. She frowns upon it when I spend over like $25 in beer.
Oh, gotta watch that stuff. Gotta watch that stuff.
Yeah, because there's been this one time where went to this place in Columbia. It's called the Craft Beer Cellar.
Okay.
And I bought 2 boxes worth of beer.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept bringing stuff up to the front counter and everything. I had a general idea that I was about to spend about $100 or so.
Mm-hmm.
But the wife didn't. So I just didn't say anything. She's like, yeah, that one sounds good. We'll get that one. I was just like, all right. So I just kept bringing them to the front counter, not really saying much. Then we go to ring out, and it's a little over $100. She looks at me, doesn't say anything in the store. So I'm like, oh, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
And we get inside the car, and she looks at me. She's like, never fucking again. I'm like, what?
Hey,
Like,
all I could say is she helped you with that too.
yeah.
She saw the prices and she was okay with those beers.
She just wasn't doing the math in her head as I was doing it.
So,
I won the battle. I did not win the war.
Yeah.
The battles now consist of me getting a $30 limit when we go back.
Unless somehow people send you beer, then it's a whole different story, right?
Yes. But yeah, no, the battle is I get like $30 a week in beer.
Nice.
Which that's about if I drink 30, I really don't drink $30 worth of beer a week.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually get like maybe 2 6-packs a week.
For me, I get like $30 or $40 worth of beer, but it's like 1 6-pack or 1 mix 6, and then I usually get a bomber bottle of whatever is hot at the moment. If
we had a selection of bombers here,
mm-hmm.
that's how I used to do it when I lived in Warrensburg, because they had this nice shop that carried the 22-ounce bombers,
mm-hmm.
where I could buy 1 6-pack and like 4 or 5 bombers, and
mm-hmm.
I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Because those bombers are typically higher ABV beers.
Mm-hmm.
And so on. But I do this thing where I do buy 18 packs of PBR.
It's okay. That's the one thing we brought up a couple weeks back. That's
what
okay
I
to
do
get PBR.
Is
yeah.
Just so I don't drink my weight in craft beer.
So,
I will maybe have a couple PBRs mixed in.
So it sounds like you're kind of cleansing yourself with PBR and the craft beer.
Yeah, because if I buy 2 6-packs
mm-hmm.
and then an 18-pack of PBR will last me 2 weeks, almost 3,
mm-hmm.
between all the other beers. So
mm-hmm.
it's easier and it's cheaper, so I don't spend all my money on beer. Because I would, if I could.
I would if I could. And, I think it would be the same way, but usually, sometimes I try to save the bombers for special occasions, and I have to say, I've gotten the Love Child number 8 from Boulevard, and waiting for graduation to come around, and
there you go.
Just drink that for graduation.
I'll say if you can get a bottle of their Saison Brett as well.
I probably will. That will be one of the other beers that I'll try to get. But there is one beer that I do want to try to get that is made by Mother's and which recently came out this past Saturday.
MILF?
No, I've already had the MILF, and it's delicious. And it would be interesting.
Well, you could say so have I.
Yeah. Oh, ho, 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 ho. And recently, anyway, getting back to it, recently came out at the craft beer bash that happened in Springfield this past weekend, which I was not able to attend because I had to go pick up my sister, which is fine.
No, I blame your sister for it. She should feel reprimanded.
Damn you. Well,
Yeah.
the thing is, I don't know if they've made bombers out of this beer yet, but they've made a beer called the Cobra Scare 53, which is an Ozark-style ale, which I had to do some research of what the hell is an Ozark-style ale. And it was pretty much just asking a person that was there, and he told me that it was a wheat sour beer, which, okay, I'm okay with that. I was hoping that it was more boozy in a way, had more of a hoppy bite to it, because it's a Cobra Scare. Cobras. You would think it would have a bite to it. Not necessarily...
Well, maybe that's why it's sour.
Maybe, but, every person that I've talked to about this, they're kind of disappointed that it's not something that's hoppy. But then again, every other beer that Mother's puts out is a somewhat hoppy or really boozy beer.
They got to diversify their portfolio.
Yeah, and I think
God, I just sounded like every corporate meeting I hated.
It's okay. You're correct, and I think that's I think this is the first sour, in my recollection, that they've made. So I'm ready to try this beer out.
Well, no, they had a cucumber gosa.
Oh yeah, that backyard beer that was just whatever. That's all I can say. Yeah, it does count. But hopefully if they have bombers of that, I can get one and keep it in my refrigerator for graduation. And get the Saison Brett. And maybe try to get this year's version of Woot Stout. Which would be fun.
What I did. You do what I did when I graduated college. I got 2 kegs of Boulevard, 1 pale ale, 1 Boss Tom. Their Boss Tom they don't make anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then I graduated in 2014. I did a vertical of their BBQ, Bourbon Barrel Quad.
Ooh, oof.
I did 3 years. I did a 3-year vertical of that.
That sounds horrible.
And we drank all 3, finished both kegs, and then went to the bar.
That's celebrating, folks.
Yeah,
that sounds like a World Series championship right there.
Yeah. It was insane.
But, besides that, that's kind of like all the beers that I've been wanting to try. And, we've been... something is still, speaking of beers, we're trying to get something going.
We got something in the works.
Yeah.
If people could... we sent out a couple emails, messages... And we're trying to put something where Andrew and I actually are in the same room together, and drinking beers or something of that extent.
Mm-hmm. We can't give you the full details because the people that we've tried to contact.
We want to be 100% sure before we talk about it.
Yeah, and also the people that we've tried to contact haven't got back to us. So we're just waiting. So we're just waiting for that, and I think that will.
Doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
And if they can't do it as soon as we want, but if they can do it a little later in the future, then of course we'll still be okay with it.
Yeah, I have no problem doing it any other time. I just would like to know if they would like to do something, which would be cool. And of course, you have to give them all the parameters too. You just can't say what you want to do and what and that's it. I gave them a little estimate of how big our equipment is, which is actually very little, and doing equipment research for more equipment. It actually will be, if I get everything correctly, it will be about the same price for what our equipment is. So that's always a plus. The equipment that we have now, so plus. And actually, I get a little bit more out of it, too, which is, again, plus. But besides that is it for the beer segment. And now we just got to talk a little bit about our thoughts with the trade deadline. One thing that I totally forgot to think of during the trade deadline is Zach Britton. Everybody was trying to go...
Or the lack thereof.
The lack thereof of Zach Britton.
Because there were some late rumors about him going to the Astros, which, we talked about before the break that is someone they could have used. But the Orioles couldn't work out a deal to get him gone.
And that's kind of where, that's with other teams too, not only with the Astros.
Well, yeah, who knows what the Orioles were wanting, what other teams offered, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of things about Zach Britton that, he was injured part of the season, and I think it would have been a good idea to trade him off to get something.
He's only pitched 20 innings so far.
Yeah, and he's usually their closer or, end of game reliever, depending on what's going on. Mostly closer. But it was just... go ahead.
This is the last... he signed through 2017. He has 1 year left of arbitration. So, it's a team maybe like the Astros who could make another run next year could keep him on staff. So it's kind of weird not to see him moved.
Yeah, and that's why I'm just kind of whatever about it, in a sense.
Yeah, especially after the year he had last year. And pretty much every year since 2014.
And, some teams don't like to trade off their players, Cardinals. But overall, just looking at what Zach Britton did from last year, like you said, and the possibilities that he could do this year for a team that's going to be in contention, it was just a little bit, underperforming, underwhelmed by the little, to a little attention to what teams wanted for Zach Britton. You can go on to any website like MLB Trade Rumors, ESPN, and all that stuff. Yeah, the Dodgers, the Astros wanted to try to get him, but it just wasn't enough for what they wanted, I guess.
So, I'm looking at his stat line from last year. Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. And
67 innings pitched, and he only let up 4 earned runs.
Yeah.
And only 7 runs all year. 1 home run, 18 walks, 74 strikeouts.
Literally could have won the Cy Young, but didn't.
Yeah. He finished 63 of the 69 games he pitched.
How many saves?
47.
47, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation with that. And that's why it was just a little bit odd that nobody wanted to talk about Zach Britton during the trade deadline.
Yeah, and even this year, he's not pitching bad. His ERA is a 3.15, but he's only pitched 20 innings. He was hurt, but he still only let up 7 runs. He has 16 strikeouts. His FIP is a 275. So, I'm just kind of astounded by his numbers last year. I know he was good, but I just didn't realize he was that good.
Yeah, he was astounding last year to the point where really it was just ridiculous. A lot of people were just upset that he didn't win the American League Cy Young because he was just doing so well. And then you look at last year's playoff game, Toronto and Baltimore. Why didn't Buck Showalter put in his best pitcher, Zach Britton, against Toronto? And there you go. The story ends right there. Toronto wins the game, and a lot of people are upset with Buck Showalter and his managerial decisions. But, besides that, really, the trade deadline is over with. But the trades aren't done. And even though...
Because what you can do now as an MLB team is this is the waiver trade deadline.
Because the one before, the one
is
that
the non-waiver.
Yeah, everybody talks about is non-waiver. And if you don't
because
know...
what happens
now
is a player can be put on the waivers list. And if you put a player on the waivers list, he can be picked up by another team,
Mm-hmm.
or you could pull him back from waivers,
Mm-hmm.
or you could trade him after he's been on the list.
Mm-hmm. And an article by the MLB Trade Rumors actually, it really gives a nice detail about it. And yeah, like you said, the waivers, they have to at least be, as it said here, have to at least be on the waivers for at least 47 hours. So 2 days pretty much.
Yep.
And as it says here with some of the bullet points, after the trade deadline, a big league player must pass through revocable waivers, which means if you put them on the waivers, you can get them right back like in an hour or so. And then there's irrevocable, which is just once you put him on waivers, he has to go through those days before you can get him back, if possible. But getting back to it, pass through revocable waivers before his team can trade him without restriction. These waivers last 47 hours. If no one claims him in that period, his team can trade him to anywhere. If a player is claimed, his team can do one of three things. It can trade the player to the claiming team, revoke the waiver request, in case the player will remain with his original team, or simply allow the claiming team to take the player and his salary. Although a player... Yeah, go ahead.
If the original team lets the player be claimed by the waiver team, the team claiming him takes the full brunt of his remaining salary.
Yeah. And it also says here, after I said that, it says, although a player with no trade rights can block this from happening. And, of course, it gives a little bit of examples, and then it goes back to write what it was, a little bit more of it. A team that has 48.5 hours to trade a claimed player can only negotiate with a team awarded the claim on him. So pretty much meaning you can't, if the player is claimed by another team, you can only talk to that team. The original team can only talk to that team. Can't talk to anybody else unless he's not claimed, and then you can trade him. And, as it says here, it's common for teams to place players on revocable waivers, and their having done so does not necessarily mean that they are serious plans to trade them. As Jason Stark, which also, if you read the article by MLB Trade Rumors, it does talk about Jason Stark's article with ESPN. But it says, as Starks points out, teams commonly use waivers of certain players purely as a smokescreen to disguise which players they really are interested in trading. In fact, sometimes teams place their entire rosters on waivers. Very, very interesting. So I'm going to try to do that in Out of the Park Baseball, but hopefully nobody gets taken away, right?
That would be the key.
That would be the key. But then again, it was just as that one time, it took just a couple days for a player to be taken away from my hands. Darn you, Cardinals of 2017, game one of Andrew Sherman's general manager career. But I mean, there's other things with it too. Some other examples and things about it. Like, one is player not on a 40-man roster are eligible to be traded at any time without passing through waivers, which pretty much means any prospect. Because if you have a player that's on the active roster, more than likely they're on the 40-man. So, and some of the prospects are on the 40-man. And then if a team pulls a player back from waivers once, it cannot do it again in August. So if a team places a player on waivers for a second time, those waivers are non-revocable or irrevocable. And those are the ones that you'll just have to wait and see what happens. And that's what happened to me. I put players on the non-revocable waivers, and they were picked up. So,
yeah.
But, I mean, what else can I do, right? But, I mean, you know, it does, there are some instances where it has happened.
Well, look what the Dodgers and the Red Sox did in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Where they sent Josh Beckett, Adrian Gonzalez, and someone else, and then the Red Sox end up clearing like $10 million worth of cap space, and the Dodgers are where they're at now.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, so, I mean, it can happen anytime, August, but after that, there's no more trading. It will be to the the full 40-man active roster, the secondary roster, I guess. Yeah, the secondary roster. And no more trading after that. And so, I mean, that's kind of where we're at the moment. We're now just back to normal routine mode.
Regular scheduled programming
until we get into September, which then will cut
down. We'll talk about call-ups. We'll see some of the new exciting prospects get about 70 or so at bats.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll start seeing teams set their playoff roster.
Yeah, and that's going to be the exciting time for baseball is September to October, into October, is seeing that because August, again, will kind of be the next filter into what's going on with baseball. You already have the June filter. You already had the July filter. Now we're going to go through August. And now, I mean, from now till September, we'll just be filtering out the other teams that aren't going to make it to the playoffs. And, some teams might be teams that we thought they were going to make it. Some teams might not. So, I mean, it's up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's just what it is. Is just through August, you'll see more and more of the wild card become a battle between X amount of teams.
Mm-hmm.
Not really in the National League, but in the American League.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the Royals, Red Sox, Rays, and Mariners competing for those two spots.
Mm-hmm.
And so through August, you'll see what happens, especially with the trades the Royals and the Red Sox and the Rays made.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't hit a whole lot on the Rays, but the Rays did go out and get Lucas Duda, and they got Dan Jennings. Mm-hmm. So they beefed up in a couple places.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, don't forget about they got Steve Cishek too from I believe not from Philadelphia. I'm thinking of Pat Neshek. Too many names that go around, that are somewhat similar. But yeah, they got a reliever too out of it with, like I said, Mr. If I can talk today, Mr. Steve Cishek, which I believe Pat Neshek and Steve Cishek have been on the Cardinals. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And they got him from the Mariners, which I should also add. But that's going to do it here, folks. I mean, we kind of gave you the primer for what's going to be happening for the rest of August into September. We're going to see guys probably come up through the ranks. Sooner or later, teams that didn't do trades but are still part of the races are going to start adding their prospects sooner or later. So, I mean, it's always an enjoyable ride to do that. So, I mean, that's going to be here for it, folks, for the MLBeers podcast. So, of course, you can always find us on Twitter at MLBeers.com, at MLBeers Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, MLBeers Podcast. We have an Instagram account, which lately...
let me guess.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is it MLBeers Podcast?
I think so. I'm not really sure.
If you just type
MLBeers
Podcast into Google, you will find all of our stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm pretty sure that you'll find our website, which is MLBeers.wordpress.com. Then we have an email, which is MajorLeagueBeers@gmail.com if you want to get in contact with us. We both have Twitter. Mine is RealAWS13. And Phil, what is yours?
At Philco816.
And also, we're a part of the Tangent-Bound Network, which has lovely podcast, more of the comic style. I think recently I've seen some of them actually were part of the San Diego Comic-Con, which is always a big deal for quote-unquote geeks and nerds, but everybody is quote-unquote a nerd, even though they don't.
Something.
Yeah, even though they don't want to say they are, which is funny. And,
embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it. And of course, really looking back at this just real quick, it's been a fun ride. We're at, I believe, episode 22 of this glorious podcast, and it's been fun so far. Of course, we missed episode 20, but I just wanted to say that it's been fun, and we got a couple weeks left, and I don't really know what we're gonna do after the playoffs, but that's gonna be something for us to figure out, and you guys to wait. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
So from all of us here from the MLBeers podcast, our motto, our creed, our saying here, win or lose, there is always booze.